Hi everyone, so I'm back out again today, and in this video we're going to have a little look at doing some work to proof our recall against distraction. So ultimately what I'm looking for is that I blow my recall whistle and she runs straight back to me regardless of what's going on around her. So we'll give it a go and see how we get on.
So to start off with, I'm just setting up a very simple recall without any distractions, just to check that she is able to think and function and respond without distractions before I start making it any more complex. So I sit her up and walk away, I then blow my recall, she responds immediately and comes bounding back to me and gets a reward. So that worked well. I might at some point look at tidying up the finish of our recall, but for the moment she can crash into me and that's absolutely fine. So that worked, so I moved on to adding in a distraction. So I'm starting off with a food bowl. I have not put any food in it, but Ivy doesn't know that. So the reason I've done that is that if she does go wrong, it means she's not going to get rewarded for doing the wrong thing. So I'm starting out with the bowl empty. I'm placing it behind her initially and then recalling her away, and that was perfectly fine. She came straight back to me without even looking at the food bowl, and that's what I want with my recall. I want it to be an instant reaction. I don't want her to stop and think about it. I want her to hear that whistle and come straight back to me every time, regardless of what's going on around her. So as that repetition was successful, I'm now going to make it a little bit more difficult by changing the placement of the food bowl. So instead of her recalling away from it, she's going to now be recalling past the bowl, but it is still a good distance from her, so hopefully it shouldn't be too challenging and we should get success. Again, a nice successful repetition at that level, and so we progress it on to make it a little bit more challenging again by moving the food bowl even closer. Now I've decided to use the food bowl to start this session as it's quite a low level distraction for Ivy, so hopefully it sets us up for success at the start. And then I'm going to change the distractions as we go through the session to make it more and more challenging. If you have a particularly foodie dog who would find food really distracting, then you might want to start with something else for them and then build up to food as your final ultimate distraction to play about with. It's probably worth noting that every time she successfully recalls back to me, I am clicking my clicker to mark that she's got it right, she's done the correct behaviour, and then I am rewarding her. So I am rewarding her after every successful repetition of the recall. The way that I reward her can vary, so here I'm going to give her a little scatter feed on the floor. And I do use food a lot with Ivy, but you can use it in so many different ways. So there I gave her a scatter feed. Sometimes I'll throw the food for her to chase after. Sometimes I'll throw it in the air for her to catch. And you don't just have to use food, you can use toys, throw them, hide them, scatter them, tug, whatever really does it for your dog essentially. So I mix up how I reward, but I do always reward every time she gives me a successful recall, because ultimately when you're training in a way that is kind of purely reward based, you have to make sure that these behaviours have a super strong reinforcement history for them to work in the really distraction environments that we're building up to. So now I have changed the setup, I've taken my food bowl away and I am now repeating the same exercise with a dummy. So on that occasion there was a dummy thrown out behind her and she had to recall away from it, which she did nice and successfully. And then we're resetting. This time she's going to have to run past that dummy that I've just thrown out. She did look at it that time, so it's clearly starting to get a little bit more difficult, but she was successful, so she got to have a little play with the ball. Now I'm quite comfortable that she is happy to recall past distractions that are stationary, that I can recreate myself. So now I'm looking to up the ante a bit more. Now I'm going to try and get her to recall whilst there is a moving distraction, but this is quite difficult when you're on your own. So you'll see here, I recall her and then at the very last minute I throw the dummy gently behind me and she didn't go for it, so she gets rewarded. Now in an ideal world you would have someone else doing this with you, throwing the distraction, so that if the dog goes wrong they can pick the distraction up before the dog gets it, because if they get it then they're going to be self-rewarding for the wrong thing. But what I'm doing is trying to play about with how distracting the movement of the object is. So initially those two, I just kind of dropped it behind me, so it's really not that interesting for her. If I lob it over my shoulder, that's obviously going to be a lot more distracting. So playing about with those levels. Here I upped the ante too quickly, and you'll see she got it wrong. And this is where it would have been great to have someone else who could have picked that dummy up rather than her getting it. But she went wrong, so I collected the dummy off of her. No fuss, no reward given, and we're just going to reset the exercise again. But this time I'm going to throw the distraction slightly differently just to make it a little bit easier for her so we can get success. And you'll see that she thinks about going for the dummy here, but she doesn't, so she gets rewarded for that, and then we reset again. And then we're going to go back to a similar level where she last got it wrong. So she looks at it, which is fine because she didn't chase after it. So massive reward for that, and we have a nice little play. And then I reset for one final repetition. Now on this time I do up the ante quite a lot, and that's me just being a bit of a rubbish trainer, but I'm lucky that I have a good dog and that we get success. So this time I kind of throw it past her and she comes straight back to me, so another really successful repetition. She gets rewarded with a scatter feed, and then she gets the ultimate reward of being able to come to heel and being sent to retrieve the dummy. And that was our session complete, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into one of the ways that we are working to proof our recall against various different distractions.